Okay, we are a little behind of schedule, but let's start the first Lux Mea Forum of Seoul National University. My name is Professor Sung-Hoon An of Seoul National University Mechanical Engineering, also Director of Institute of Advanced Machinery, Machines and Design. Welcome everyone to the first Lux Mea Forum. And introducing the forum first, the truth, right? Truth is the goal of academia, and truth, by the definition, is not changing much. But in the practice of academia, we changed the truth in study of each field. So we have a new theory and new findings and new research result. So the data is keep changing, and we want to have a forum today with very world-renowned two professors and understand what's going on in the field of intelligence. So Professor Noble, Denis Noble from the University of Oxford, who is a pioneer and the renowned professor in the system biology. Sorry about my wording. And so he developed a new theory, and he's going to show what that is today. And we have a Professor Kunwoo Lee, president of DGIST. He's a very well-known engineer, especially in our department. He was a former faculty of mechanical engineer, also dean of College of Engineer. Then he is well known for his AI and robotics and CAD throughout his academic career. So with these two different fields, we want to discuss about the intelligence. What is intelligence overall? And this is also bridging different cultures and different academia. So we have University of Oxford and DGIST, SNU together, and different fields of biology and the engineering. And we want to have Koreans and English, British, and we want to share the language together. So from now on, I'm going to use Korean language. So, so this is first, and yes, then I'm going to ask first to the Professor Denis Noble, what is motto of University of Oxford? This question before you start. Do you know? Do you remember what is motto of University of Oxford?
Lux Mea.
Oh yeah.
Yes. It is, of course, precisely Illuminatio Mea, Lux Mea. It's precisely this motto.
Perfect, A+. And I'm going to ask to Professor or President Kunwoo Lee, what's the motto of DGIST?
혁신으로 세상을 바꾸는 융복합대학. 저는 여기서 세상을 바꾸는 데 굉장히 방점을 두고 싶습니다.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so they know the motto of their school. So what is the motto of SNU? Anyone? It's been around in the logos and the brochure. There's a Veritas, Lux Mea. So Veritas is truth. We study for truth. And Lux Mea is my light. So interestingly, I didn't know, and then I found that, as Professor Noble said, the motto of University of Oxford is Dominus Illuminatio Mea. God is my light. It's the same as SNU Veritas, Lux Mea. I don't know who copied who, but probably SNU copied. Yeah, because the SNU motto started from 1947, so it's much later than Oxford. Oxford more than 600 years. So that is the light. So today we want to have a light from two great professors, right? And then what is intelligence? That's the goal of this forum. We want to have that kind of time, and then freely, as I said, you can say anything after the conversation and Q&A. You can ask Korean language. We have AI assisted the translator, right? So the language doesn't matter for the communication. And then I want to thank to everyone participating here, especially Professor Sung-hee Kim from Oxford University, also DGIST, to initiate this kind of a great seminar forum. And yeah, please, stand up, and then everyone can give a big applause for her. Yeah. So I met Professor Noble through Professor Sung-hee Kim in Chiang Mai in this summer. So I heard his great talk, very similar to today's talk. And then that's the reason we invited Professor Noble and then Professor Kunwoo Lee for today's very exciting time. Okay, so that's about my introduction. And actually, Professor Young-ho Kim, Dean of Engineering, should be coming, but he's in a very important meeting, so he will come later. And why don't you start the first great talk from Professor Denis Noble with a big round of applause. Please welcome him.
First of all, a huge honor to be asked to come to give a talk at the first of the SNU Forums, Lux Mea Forums. I, of course, have struggled with the Latin of my university because all our degree ceremonies are in Latin. But I'm very pleased I did that because many years ago, I came across a very important letter written in the 17th century by the great philosopher Benedict de Spinoza to the Royal Society in London. Concipiamus iam si placet univem reticulum. Conceive, if you will, a tiny worm swimming in the blood who would have no idea what the function of the blood is. Anyway, it's all written in beautiful Latin, and it inspired one of my books, Dance to the Tune of Life. But that's another story. I'm also delighted that I should be introduced today by Professor Ahn, because it was his precision engineering conference held in Thailand in July of this year, in which I first gave a lecture with precisely this title, Born of Water, Built on Silicon, Are We So Different in Intelligence? Now, got to make sure we press the right button. And so, I think it is actually an example of precision engineering because it is very precise organism development that depends, as I'm going to show, on there being fabulous engineers of what they have. Imprecision, stochasticity, everything moving all over the place, because that's what's happens all the time in water. Robert Brown showed that in 1827. Sprinkle some very fine pollen dust on water under a microscope, and you see the particles moving everywhere. So the questions I'm going to address are here. How can it be possible? How did it evolve? And could AI mimic it? That's the big question. Or would it need to use computers built of water? Because silicon is completely different. It forms a diamond cubic crystal structure because the atoms, of course, they vibrate depending on the precise temperature, but they do not themselves move around. All that can move around are the electrons, which of course makes it very good for use in computers. The melting point will be way, way up there in the thousands of degrees, too high for any living systems on Earth. Water is our chemistry. And what else are we precisely made of? Well, we're made of the most common chemical elements in the universe, hydrogen, carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, but they are combined in an unimaginably large number of possible ways. DNAs, RNAs, proteins are all long polymers, threads of sequences of either nucleotides or amino acids. DNA, and this is a figure to keep in mind during my talk, contains 3 billion nucleotide pairs all the way along the threads. Moreover, genomes are unique to each individual because there wouldn't be enough stuff in the whole universe for every possible sequence of 3 billion base pairs to exist. That's a calculation I did about 20 years ago. So, all of life's molecules are dissolved in water, and of course it exists as a liquid in standard conditions. It's a great solvent too for all the polar particles, but even the non-polar particles, the fats, can exist in suspension as either globules or bubbles. All living organisms, in fact, are bubbles made of a membrane, a fatty membrane around them. And it conducts electricity as ions. Another important point is it floats when frozen. That's very unusual for liquids. Most liquids, when they solidify, descend down to the bottom. And this is the Brownian motion I referred to. 1827 is when Robert Brown first detected it. The pollen particles were just moving around stochastically the whole time. Now I'm going to show you that precisely because of the kinds of chemistry that organisms exist and are made of, they cannot be determinate machines. And this conclusion is precisely the opposite of the central dogma of molecular biology first formulated by Francis Crick in 1958. And the dogma also led to the very famous book, brilliantly written, but also brilliantly wrong, The Selfish Gene, that from the genome alone, we could compute, predict the organism. I'll show it's just the other way round. Organisms themselves actually control their genes. And so that led to me writing Dance to the Tune of Life, inspired, as I said at the beginning, by Spinoza's letter to the Royal Society in 1666. And I think, therefore, life challenges AI people. Can you mimic this openness to stochasticity? That's the big question. And would that require computers made of water? The maths, as I said earlier on, can be found in my little book, The Music of Life, published nearly 20 years ago. There could be 10 to the 70,000 different combinations of interactions from products of our genomes. There are only around 10 to the 80 atoms in the whole of the universe. Each of us, therefore, is unique. That's clear. Now, we might be unique, but we might still be predictable. Well, the fact is that water is a very unusual molecule. These two, oxygen and hydrogen, would require you to go down to temperatures way, way below 0 degrees for them to be solid. To be liquid, in fact, because they'd be gases at the temperature at which our bodies normally exist. Now, another fact I want to introduce. One of the smallest living organisms, a bacterium, Salmonella, it's a rod by about 1 micron by 4 microns. It has 20 billion water molecules in it. Imagine wanting to simulate at a molecular level 20 billion water molecules. No available computer could reproduce all of those molecular states. It's intelligence in a tiny volume because it knows how to swim around and to find its food. So what do organisms do with their vast stochasticity? They use it. DNA replication, first of all. The standard view, developed first by the great quantum mechanics pioneer Schrödinger, and then taken over by Watson and Crick, and then also taken over by Richard Dawkins, is that it replicates automatically like a crystal, self-replication. Now, that's true in part. When unwound, the double helix will naturally attract the pairs A and T together, C and G together. But in a purely chemical environment that's been tested in 2011 and 2012, it produces around one error in about 10,000 base pairs. That's pretty low error rate for a chemical process, but it's far from adequate. Remember what I said earlier on? We have 3 billion. There would be around 500,000 errors. It just wouldn't work. Now, that does two things. First of all, it means that DNA replication, which is in fact very accurate from one cell to the next, cannot be self-replication, cannot be replicating like a crystal. Schrödinger was wrong. So was Watson Crick, and so is Dawkins. But it also does something else. It makes massive possible changes available to the organism when it needs to use it. How do they use it? Well, they use it intelligently. First of all, living cells correct all of those errors, and only the living cell knows how to do that by orchestrating an army of cut and paste enzymes. They literally creep along the DNA and correct it, one base pair after another. Accurate copying is therefore not independent of the living cell. That is Dawkins' great mistake. And when required, cells can use it. Just consider what was happening during the virus pandemic, coronavirus. The immune system detected that there was a new virus, but it did not have the grabbing molecule called an immunoglobulin that could grab it and neutralize it. So it told its cells to start using all of this stochasticity to find millions of new grabbing molecules. It then selected the ones that work. It is intelligent enough to do that, and then told those cells to reproduce. In other systems in the body, our nervous systems in particular, that kind of stochasticity can also be used. And I now come to Alan Turing, the godfather of artificial intelligence, in his paper in 1950, published in the philosophical journal Mind, Computing, Machinery and Intelligence. And he wrote, it is probably wise to include a random element in a learning system. And of course, the people making AI systems that can learn know that you have to do that. And he went on, since there is probably a very large number of satisfactory solutions, the random method seems to be better than the systematic. And then he went on to say, it should be noticed that it's used in the analogous process of evolution. Precisely so. That also uses the stochasticity. And I come to a little story. In my little book with my brother, Raymond Noble, Understanding Living Systems, we imagine a love affair between a human-like robot, the girl, Julie, and the boy. and they have a great time for 6 months before, she says, after a big row that they have, when I responded with my charming smile, he got even more angry with me. Julie, he said, it's fantastic what you do, but where do you really want to go in your life? I need to know that if we're to stay together. He even smacked me as though to wipe away my smile before he repeated his insistent question, where do you really want? How dare he? The trouble is, I can't bring myself to tell him the truth. You see, as a human, seems he doesn't need to do things just at random. It seems that his creativity is part of a plan, what he wants to do. It's as though he controls his random number generator, if that's what he really has. Oh dear, I'm made of nanosilicon chips. In fact, he doesn't contain silicon at all. His basic material is water. You can read the rest in my little book. It's chapter 8, I think, of Understanding Living Systems. Let's go on to the conclusions. First of all, living organisms precisely control the imprecision in their stochasticity. And each organizational level achieves that by harnessing the stochasticity of the level below. And this is precise, multi-level meshing, all the way from organism at the top, through to systems, through to organs, through to cells, all the way down to the atomic level. And once harnessed, randomness is no longer random. Precision, development, and inheritance therefore arises precisely from that harnessing, leaving the system open to improbable, perhaps even rarely necessary behavior when that is required. And a colleague of mine, helping me with this work, discovered water computers have existed for a long time, all the way from 1900, when people built hydraulic algebraic machines with water, all the way down to today with liquid marble logic. So, a substrate does not have to be solid to compute. And there's a quote from one of the earliest people to use water. But the big question from this lecture is the one at the bottom there. Can liquid computers mimic the multi-level, multi-scale harnessing of stochasticity? And that's my great challenge to the AI community. Acknowledgements, the acknowledgement to my co-author of the little book, Understanding Living Systems, and it was Ren Bourret in Paris who did the research on liquid computers for me. Thank you very much indeed.
I'm sorry about not introducing Professor Denis before the talk, but then he's so well known, so I mean, I don't have to introduce. You can search in the Wikipedia and the website. He has a lot of videos and books, so you can find his background, but still briefly introducing him. His age is almost 90. Do you believe that? Yeah. And then still actively writing and then publishing book and doing research. He's a pioneer of system engineer and system biology. So as his talk, Richard Dawkins' theory of gene is everything, right? Combination of gene is making the decision of a body. But his theory is not that. It's not just gene, but then above cell and then upper organism is controlling the gene. That's why the errors can be minimized and then we can survive. That's his new theory, and that's why we invite him. His theory is not that popular because he didn't get Nobel Prize yet, but he was nominated to the candidate several times. So his theory is own very original, and that's we can think about developing our own theory, right? That's and another thing is at the age of 23, he published a single author Nature paper, single author, age 23, without advisor. Yeah. So that was the mathematical model at that time, 1960, the cardiac control, I mean, the motion of the heartbeat, right? That's he developed the mathematical model of the heart system and published paper, and then actually we had a communication. He brought that idea to advisor, but advisor says, I don't understand. So he published himself, right? So he's genius actually, right? So yeah, thank you very much again for very inspiring talk. And then he gave the idea of a water-based computer, right? We never thought, but the water can be computer, and then it's been more than 100 years research, right? As he said. Okay, our second speaker, let me introduce Professor Kunwoo Lee. He's currently president of DGIST and former Dean of College of Engineering and also a faculty of Mechanical Engineering. He is well known in his CAD book. You know, he wrote a book that's Bible of CAD, and then I use his book for my class, and then he's well known. And then also he studied at AI and robotics. Right now his administration work is busy as DGIS, but then his background is more like a very fundamental computers and AI. And then he moved to DGIST as president, and today he's going to talk about the future of AI and robotics. Please welcome him. Big round of applause.
안녕하십니까. 제가 서울대학에서 은퇴한 지 이제 5년이 지났는데 오랜만에 와서 강연을 하게 되니까 감회가 깊습니다. 오늘 제가 말씀드릴 내용은 그러니까 그 제목이 Robotics and AI as the bridge between bio and silicon. 바이오와 실리콘을 연결하는 다리로서의 로보틱스와 AI라는 내용이 되겠는데요. 여기서 실리콘이란 바이오라는 거는 생명체 또는 뭐 자연현상 그런 거를 뜻하는 내용이 되겠고요. 실리콘이라는 거는 반도체로 대표되는 어떤 그 첨단 기술. 그래서 첨단 기술과 바이오를 어떻게 우리가 융합을 할 거냐. 그 융합을 하는 도구로서 로보틱스와 AI를 소개하겠다는 그런 내용이 되겠습니다. 이게 어디 갔지? 왜 우리가 이런 그 실리콘과 바이오를 융합해야 되는가 그런 얘기를 먼저 하고 그 다음에 이 바이오에서 어떤 영감을 받은 어떤 혁신들은 어떤 것이 있는가 사례를 좀 발표하고 다음에 또 이 실리콘 enabled transformation 그러니까 어떤 이런 첨단 기술에 의해서 이루어진 혁신 같은 그의 혁신 그런 사례 다음에 맨 마지막으로 전망 뭐 이런 게 되겠습니다. 왜 우리가 융합을 해야 되느냐 바이오와 실리콘을 왜 융합을 해야 되느냐 뭐 잘 아시다시피 우리는 최근에 와서 굉장히 여러 가지 그 도전을 받고 있습니다. 그 하나 보면 초고령화 사회인데 그때 우리가 그 건강 수명도 같이 늘려야 되는 이 문제, 이런 게 굉장히 어려운 문제죠. 지금 해결해야 돼. 우리 인류가 해결하고 싶은 문제가 되겠죠. 또 하나는 또 우리가 최근에 굉장히 극심하게 겪는 기후 변화와 자연재해 이런 걸 어떻게 해결해야 될 것이냐. 이런 분야들은 이런 지금 거대한 문제들은 우리가 이 융합을 하지 않고는 다시 말해서 이 자연현상이나 또는 어떤 생명체가 갖고 있는 그런 인텔리전스 그거와 또 우리가 갖고 있는 첨단 기술들을 융합을 하지 않고는 해결이 안 될 것 같다. 그런 내용입니다. 그래서 그럼 그걸 뭐 어떻게 해결할 것이냐가 이제 어떻게 융합할 것이냐가 문제가 되겠죠. 그래서 그 둘 사이를 바이오하고 실리콘을 융합하려면 다리가 있어야 되겠다. 근데 그 다리의 역할을 누가 하느냐? 로보틱스와 AI가 하지 않겠는가 하는 내용이 되겠습니다. AI는 그러니까 생명체의 어떤 지능, 이 생명체나 또 자연은 오랜 시간 진화를 하면서 자기가 갖고 있는 지능이 있지 않겠습니까? 그 인텔리전스를 우리가 이 실리콘 쪽, 실리콘 쪽이라고 하면 여긴 디스크리트한 시스템이 되겠고 또 디지털 월드가 되겠습니다. 다음에 이 바이오, 그 생명체나 자연현상, 이거는 아날로그 세계입니다. 그리고 컨티뉴어스 시스템입니다. 그래서 이 아날로그 시스템에서의 어떤 지능을 우리가 그 디지털 시스템에서의 불러들이기 위해서는 우리가 AI가 사용되겠습니다. 그래서 그리고 그 다음에 또 어떤 이 디스크리트 시스템에서 어떤 컨트롤해서 다시 피지컬 월드에다가 액션을 주기 위해서는 로보틱스가 필요하겠습니다. 그래서 이 두 가지가 이런 바이오하고 실리콘을 연결하는 브릿지가 되지 않겠나 하는 내용이 되겠습니다. 우선 그러면 바이오로부터 어떤 영감을 받아 이루어진 혁신 사례를 좀 보겠습니다. 우선 이건 어떻게 보면 좀 유치할지 모르겠는데 제가 했던 일이라 요새 그 어떤 바이오 인스파이어드 이노베이션의 사례로서는 좀 유치하게 보일지도 모르겠으나 그래도 제가 한 일이기 때문에 소개해드리겠습니다. 제가 이게 스탠포드에 1년 가 있을 때 2004년 뭐 그때 가 있을 때 스탠포드의 그 뉴로서전하고 또 그 허공과 교수랑 셋이서 특허를 낸 내용이 되겠는데요. 그 특허를 내서 저기 스파이널 키네틱스라는 회사도 만들었습니다. 근데 우리가 척추 디스크 환자들이 있을 때 이게 이제 디스크인데 여기가 이게 튀어나와서 이제 신경을 건드려서 이제 우리가 통증을 받게 되는 거 아닙니까? 이렇게 엄영무 교수님 계신데 제가 이런 얘기 해도 되죠. 그래서 이제 되게 수술을 하려면 많은 경우에 이런 식으로 여기를 그냥 걷어내고 여기다가 어떤 스페이서에 해당되는 걸 딱딱한 걸 집어넣어주고 위아래 이렇게 플레이트를 해서 고정을 시켜버립니다. 나사를 박아갖고. 그렇게 되면 문제가 이거 자체가 원래 우리 사람의 디스크는 약간의 쿠션도 있고 또 상대적인 운동을 가능하게 해주죠. 그래서 이게 돌아갈 수 있게 하고 밴딩도 될 수 있게 하고. 그런데 이거 고정시켜버리니까 이거 못 움직이잖아요. 원피스가 돼버리죠, 여기가. 그럼 이 위아래 디스크들이 더 많은 모빌리티를 감당해야 돼요. 그러면 결국 이게 또 망가집니다. 그래서 결과적으로 계속 붙이게 되는 그런 문제가 생기죠. 그래서 저희가 그때 스탠포드에서 그때 했던 거는 뭔가 이 원래 사람의 디스크와 같은 미케니컬 프로퍼티를 갖는 구조물을 만들어야겠다 하고 생각했던 게 이런 식의 이제 임플란트를 만들어서 이게 스케이트 날 같이 돼 있어서 수술하기 좋게 그냥 옆에서 충격을 주고 보면 뼈를 깎고 들어가면서 딱 들어가서 그냥 고정이 되는 그런 시스템이 되겠는데 그 사이에다가 이 내부에는 말랑말랑한 엘라스토모를 넣어주고 그게 튀어나오면 안 되잖아요. 그 밖을 이런 파이브로 감아준 실제로 사람의 그 디스크도 안쪽은 말랑말랑한데 바깥은 굉장히 딱딱한 구조물로 보호가 되어 있습니다. 그래서 그런 식으로 만들어 갖고 회사를 차려서 저는 이제 발명만 같이 특허만 같이 내고 왔는데 그때 그 남아있던 스탠포드 교수들이 회사를 차려서 처음에는 목 부위에만 해갖고 독일에서는 마켓시어 1위를 갖고 있는 그런 제품이 되었습니다. 돈은 못 버는데 저는. 또 바이오 인스파이어드 AI의 또 한 예로서 뉴로모픽 컴퓨팅이 있겠는데요. 지금 우리가 많이 쓰고 있는 그 딥러닝 다 한 뉴럴 네트워크 아닙니까? 그거 자체가 우리의 뇌의 신경망을 결국 모방했다는 게 되겠는데요. 뉴로모픽은 이제 그냥 그냥 우리 뉴럴 네트워크보다는 지금 현재 쓰고 있는 뉴럴 네트워크는 너무 많은 컴퓨테이셔널 로드를 요구하니까 그런 걸 좀 더 병렬 처리를 한다든가 또는 우리 뇌의 효율성을 좀 더 모방한다든가 그렇게 해서 하는 이 뉴로모픽 컴퓨팅이 지금 점점 그 시장에서 규모가 커져서 연평균 79%로 성장해서 2030년에는 85억 8,900만 달러 정도의 한 12조 정도에 육박하는 그런 시장 규모가 된다고 합니다. 또 이 바이오 인스파이어드 로보틱스가 또 하나의 예가 되겠는데요. 이 실제로 사람과 닮은 로봇을 개발하자는 게 되겠죠. 그래서 thinking 하는 쪽은 뭐 지금 우리가 쓰는 LLM 같은 그런 뉴럴 네트워크를 쓰게 되고 무빙에 있어서는 사람과 같은 무빙을 하기 위해서 소프트 액추에이터를 쓴다든가 뭐 뉴매틱 모터를 쓴다든가 그런 걸 하게 되겠고 또 사람과 같은 어떤 센싱 기능을 가져야겠다. 뭐 비전 기능이라든가 뭐 텍타일 기능 뭐 이런 걸 넣는 그런 게 또 하나의 휴머노이드인데 사람을 좀 모방하고자 하는 그런 휴머노이드가 되겠죠. 다음에 이건 지금 디지스트에서 글로컬 랩으로 해서 지금 새로 시작하는 그런 과제가 되겠는데요. 이건 이제 사람의 쉽게 말하면 아이언맨 같은 걸 만들고자 하는 겁니다. 사람의 웨어러블을 시켜서 웨어러블을 입혀서 여러 가지 그 사람이 못하는 모션 또는 포스를 낼 수 있게 이런 팔다리를 추가로 달게 되겠죠. 그리고 머리에는 또 AI 기능이 같이 작용해서 사람의 그 기능을 대체하는 게 아니라 사람의 어떤 브레인을 더 강화시켜주는 그런 기능. 다음에 또 그 센싱 기능으로서 여러 가지 비전이라든가 이런 또는 소리를 듣는 기능이라든가 이런 거 훨씬 강화시켜주는 그런 연구를 지금 추진하고 있습니다. 여러분 세대들은 못 봤을지 모르겠는데 제가 어렸을 땐 600만 불 사나이라는 아주 재미난 프로그램 TV 미드가 있었는데 거기에 나온 사람이 저런 거죠. 요새는 이거보다 더 좋은 게 이제 아이언맨이 되겠죠. 네. 그래서 이런 걸 하고자 하는 게 바이오 인스파이어드 이노베이션 한 예가 되겠습니다. 네. 이렇게만 될 수 있다면 제가 대구에서 지금 근무하는 게 하나도 어렵지 않겠는데 이거 제가 어저께도 새벽에 그 주말에 서울 있다가 새벽에 대구 내려갔다가 밤늦게 회식까지 하고 밤늦게 올라와서 오늘 다시 이것 때문에 그거 휙휙 날아다녔으면 얼마나 좋겠습니까. 다음에 또 다른 사례에서 이제 실리콘 쪽에서 드라이브가 돼갖고 실리콘 이네이블드 트랜스포메이션에 대한 사례를 설명드리겠습니다. 그 중에 하나가 휴먼 디지털 트윈. 그러니까 사람과 똑같은 디지털 트윈을 하자는 게 되겠죠. 여기 그 데니스 노블 교수는 그러니까 심장의 디지털 트윈을 처음에 시도하셨던 아주 선구적인 그 당시엔 디지털 트윈이라는 용어도 없었을 텐데 그런 걸 하신 분이니까 여기서 제가 같이 강연하는 게 참 영광으로 생각합니다. 네. 근데 이렇게 디지털 트윈이 되면 뭐 우리가 우선 의학의 파라다임이 완전히 바뀌리라 봅니다. 임상시험 같은 거는 뭐 그냥 다 시뮬레이션으로 대체하고 또 신약 테스트도 뭐 그냥 시뮬레이션으로 다 할 수 있고 그래서 의학 파라다임이 이제 예측까지 완전하게 되는 그런 변화가 있을 것 같습니다. 그래서 헬스케어도 아주 정밀해지고 또 사람들의 그 맞춤형 정밀의학이 돼서 사람마다 그 시뮬레이션을 통해서 정확한 치료가 가능해지고 신약 개발이 굉장히 빨라지고 이런 것이 장점이 되겠습니다. 또 이제 로봇을 이용해서 마이크로 로봇 for intrabody intervention. 그건 이제 사람 몸속으로 들어가서 로봇이 사람의 질병을 치료하게 하는 그런 사례도 또 생기겠는데요. 이 디지스트의 창업 기업인 IM 시스템은 자기장으로 유도되는 와이어 마이크로 로봇을 이용해서 첨단 의료용 마이크로 로봇 시스템도 개발했습니다. 한번 영상으로 보겠습니다. 이 영상이 동영상인데 원래 돌아가는지 잘 안 돌아가나 보죠? 이게 굉장히 첨단 얘기를 하면서 이런 건 또 잘 안 되네. 야, 그럼 돌아갑니까? 이렇게 되면 아주 미니멈 인베이시브한 서저리들이 가능해져서 그래서 뭐 감염의 염려도 굉장히 줄어들고 또 그 회복 스스로 회복이 굉장히 빨라지고 그런 장점이 생겼습니다. 이제 그만 봐도 될 것 같은데. 그 다음으로 언제 어떻게 넘어갈지 제가 잘 모르겠네. 또 AI 기반의 이게 돌아가 버렸네. 예. 그 AI 기반 로봇 시스템이 로봇 팔을 제어해서 사람이 할 수 없는 정밀한 움직임을 구현하게 하는데 뭐 지금도 그 서저리 로봇들이 있죠. 근데 지금의 서저리 로봇들은 결국 마스터 앤 슬레이브 시스템이라 의사가 한쪽에서 보면서 이렇게 영상 보면서 작업을 하면 속에서 이제 로봇이 수술을 하는 그런 게 되겠는데 궁극적으로는 이제 그 안에 들어간 로봇이 자율적으로 움직이면서 우리 자율주행하듯이 그런 로봇이 돼야 되지 않을까 그런 내용이 되겠습니다. 우리의 비전은 무엇인가 이렇게 되겠는데요. 저희 학교 홍보를 좀 하겠습니다. 나온 김에. DGIST의 가장 큰 아까 그 슬로건이 모토가 뭐냐고 아까 안 교수가 그러셨는데 저희는 맨 뒤 저는 아까 그러니까 그 혁신으로 세상을 바꾸는 융복합 대학이었는데 저는 아까 세상을 바꾸는 데 저 방점을 두고 싶다고 했는데 그 뒤를 보면 융복합 대학입니다. 그래서 저희가 학부에 저희는 저게 없습니다. 학과가 없습니다. 그러니까 단일 학부로 되어 있습니다. 그래서 애초에 융합을 할 수 있는 굉장히 좋은 여건이 되어 있다는 거고요. 또 학생들이 그 트랙은 있습니다. 그래서 뭐 기계 트랙, 전자 트랙 뭐 이런 트랙들이 있는데 그거를 2학년 때서부터 선택을 해요. 그럼 이제 각 트랙마다 그 요구하는 기본 과목들이 있습니다. 근데 좋은 거는 매 학기 트랙을 바꿀 수 있어요. 아무 때나. 예. 그렇게 하다 보면 어떻게 되냐면 학생들이 수없이 바꿔요. 그래서 졸업할 때 보면 대개 트랙을 2개를 끝내고 가게 돼요. 그래서 저절로 전공을 2개씩 하게 되는 그런 효과가 생긴다는 거고요. 또 우리 그 대학원에 가면 학과가 있지만 대학원 학과들도 굉장히 융복합 성격이 강하게끔 학과가 만들어져 있어요. 그래서 가령 화학 물리학과가 하나로 되어 있습니다. 그리고 로봇 같은 거는 로봇 및 기계전자 시스템인가? 정확한 명칭이 뭐예요? 로봇 및 기계전자공학과 이렇게 되어 있고 전기전자 컴퓨터가 있고 그런 식으로 또 뉴바이오 뭐 뇌과학 이런 식이 있는데 에너지도 있고요. 네. 에너지도 굉장히 융합적인 학과고 그렇게 해서 또 남들보단 다른데 최근에 그 아리조나 스테이트 유니버시티가 완전히 다 그렇게 바꿨다고 그래요. 네. 학과들 다 없애버리고 막 뭉쳐갖고 그래서 지금 제일 뭐 혁신적인 대학으로 돼 있지 않습니까? 네. 그다음에 디지스트가 새로운 그 세 가지 지금 중점적으로 하고 있는 분야를 소개드리면요. 처음에 이제 뉴로사이언스 앤 뉴로테크놀로지 해갖고 뇌에 관한 연구, 뇌 작동 원리를 연구하고 그 뇌 작동 원리가 결국은 차세대 AI 알고리즘의 원천 기술이 되기 때문에 그쪽을 연구하는 게 되겠고요. 또 뇌랑 AI하고 로봇을 연결해서 뇌 질환을 치료하는 그러한 의료 솔루션도 개발 중에 있고요. 그다음에 인간의 그 뇌와 비슷한 어떤 AI 기술을 응용해서 뇌를 치료하는 그런 게 되겠고, 그다음에 두 번째는 메디컬 로봇 앤 스마트 디바이스 해갖고 아까 방금 동영상을 보였던 그런 로봇 수술 플랫폼이라든가 AI 기반의 초정밀 진단 시스템 그리고 뭐 인체 직접 이식이 가능한 생체 진화형 디바이스 이런 걸 개발하고 있습니다. 또 세 번째는 퓨처 모빌리티에서 바이오에서 영감을 받은 그런 미래 모빌리티를 연구하고 있습니다. 이거 외에도 저희가 최근에 그 중점적으로 드라이브하고 있는 분야는 피지컬 AI, 뭐 요새 여기저기서 많이 하려고 하는 피지컬 AI, 또 휴먼 디지털 트윈, 또 퀀텀 센싱 이런 것들을 저희가 중점적으로 하고 있습니다. 궁극적으로 저희가 인재를 중요한 건 인재라고 보고요. 그 기술보다도 그 기술을 이끌어갈 인재가 중요하니까 그래서 우리는 그 디지스트에서는 융합 기술을 창의적으로 적용하는 그런 능력을 가진 인재 배양을 목표로 하고 있다 이렇게 말씀을 드립니다. 예, 우리 앞으로 그 디지스트가 라이프하고 인텔리전스의 브릿지가 되는 역할을 하겠다. 그런 각오를 말씀을 드리면서 강연을 마치겠습니다. 고맙습니다.
네, 디지스트 홍보를 겸해서 근데 디지스트뿐 아니라 서울대도 그렇고 어느 대학교든지 전 세계에서 아마 이런 분야는 앞으로 유망한 분야인데 이제 실제 직접 하신 일들을 포함해서 말씀해 주셔서 감사드립니다. 김용호 학장님께서 지금 이제 큰 일을 마치시고 오셔서 약간 순서가 바뀌었지만 학장님 축사를 듣도록 하겠습니다. 네, 큰 박수로 맞이해 주시면 감사하겠습니다.
네, 존경하는 데니스 노블, Distinguished Professor 데니스 노블, 그리고 디지스트 이건우 총장님 와주셔서 너무 감사합니다. 사실은 그저께 저희 전임 학장이시자 전임 총장님이신 이기준 교수님께서 자꾸 하셨습니다. 그래서 어저께 저는 이제 빈소에 다녀왔는데 오늘 공학칼림원하고 그다음에 여기 서울 공대랑 또 본부랑 이렇게 운구 차량이 지나갔습니다. 그래서 302동에 그 총장님 요 부조가 있습니다. 그 앞에서 이제 마지막 이렇게 방문을 해주셔서 거기 다녀오느라고 그 시간이 정확치가 않아가지고 딱 요 시간하고 겹쳐서 제가 아쉽게도 이 아주 좋은 강연 앞부분을 놓쳤습니다. 뭐 다시 한번 이 룩스메아 포럼 개최를 축하드리고요. 제가 인재상으로서 이제 우리 위원회를 만들어서 수월 융합 창의라는 그 키워드를 한 1년 전부터 이렇게 선전하고 다니는데 오늘 그거를 보여주신 자리였던 것 같습니다. 수월은 우리 기술 그 이상을 넘어서는 그런 수월성을 서울대학교에 있는 공과대학은 추구한다고 생각하고 또 융합은 우리 없는 전공이 없는 이 큰 대학에서 이렇게 서로 학생들이 어렸을 때부터 부딪히면서 자기 주도형 융합을 할 수 있는 그런 융합 그리고 또 창의는 한계를 극복하는 이런 창의력이라고 저는 생각을 했는데 오늘 이 하나하나 다 보여준 것 같습니다. 오늘 저도 굉장히 흥미롭게 봤습니다만 데니스 노블 교수님 강연을 좀 놓쳐서 아쉽습니다만 그 제목에 워터가 있더라고요. 그래서 제 전공이 워터인데 무슨 말씀하시나 하고 사실은 궁금했었습니다. 근데 나중에 강의 자료 있으면 하나 저도 좀 볼 수 있게 해주시고 그다음에 두 번째 이제 이건우 총장님 강연도 뒷부분 들었습니다만 뭐 이렇게 호기심 갖기 참 좋은 주제였고 저는 이제 그런 면에서 좀 드리고 싶은 말씀은 아까 총장님도 말씀하셨는데 세상을 바꾸는 인재를 좀 키워보고 싶었습니다. 그래서 판을 좀 흔드는 인재 그리고 새로운 지평을 여는 인재 이런 인재들을 키우고 싶었는데 오늘 이런 다른 학부나 다른 대학의 랑 좀 색다른 이런 포럼을 만들어 주시고 또 우리 학생들의 그 질문을 유발할 수 있는 이런 그 호기심 있는 주제들을 두 분이 발표를 해주셔서 굉장히 여기 젊은 연구자들이나 학생들께서 모티베이션이 충분히 됐을 거라고 저는 보고 있습니다. 그리고 또 융합을 말씀해 주셨는데 이건우 총장님께서 제가 이제 학장을 하다 보니까 공학전문대학원이나 뭐 컨설팅 센터나 이 총장님께서 학장 때 하신 일들이 참 여러 가지 있었다라는 걸 혁신적인 게 있었다는 걸 느꼈습니다. 그래서 저도 공과대학 얘기를 잠깐 말씀드리면 그 만들어 주신 저 10년이 됐습니다. 우리 공학전문대학원이. 그래서 그 공학전문대학원에 저는 그 학생 설계 전공이라는 걸 좀 만들어서 학생들이 자기 주도적으로 그 도메인 날리지와 뭐 AI 또는 아까 말씀하신 또 인텔리전스와 라이프 이런 것들을 커리큘럼을 짜가지고 그 자기 전공을 자기 주도적인 전공을 만들어보는 그런 시도를 지금 작업을 하고 있습니다. 그러면 공학전문대학원도 이제 10년 만에 한 단계 더 그러니까 학부에서 자기 도메인을 배운 사람들이 와서 융합하면서 새로운 전공을 만들어내는 거죠. 그래서 그런 지평을 열어주셔서 거기 밑거름하에서 저희도 조금 더 진일보하려고 하고 있습니다. 오늘 이렇게 그 수월과 융합과 또 거기서 새로운 아이디어를 만들어내는 창의의 그 선구자적인 역할을 해주신 포럼 또 우리 안성홍 소장님께 감사드리고 다른 학부로 좀 많이 퍼져 나갔으면 좋겠습니다. 네, 다시 한번 축하드리고 또 감사합니다.
네, 국장님 감사합니다. 포럼의 메인 첫 번째 파트가 강연이었고요. 두 번째 파트가 이제 대담이 되겠습니다. 그래서 두 분이 대담을 나누시고 여기에서 또 새로운 거를 배울 수 있는 그런 자리고, 그러니까 무슨 질문이 나올지 모르고 플로어에서도 나올 수 있고요. 지금 온라인 송출하시는데 거기에서도 이렇게 뭐 이렇게 텍스트로 질문을 올려주시면 그거를 최석영 박사님이 여기서 보시고 정리를 해서 저한테 주시면 이제 질문을 하도록 해서 뭐 약 30분 정도, 약 25분, 30분 정도의 시간이 있어서 긴 시간일 수도 있고 아닐 수도 있겠지만 이렇게 창의적으로 좋은 질문들을 해주셔서 이게 귀한 두 분을 모셨는데 여기서 많은 것을 얻어갈 수 있는 그런 시간이 되면은 좋겠습니다. 두 분 앞으로 나오시죠. 네. Okay, so before we start the questions from floor, I prepared just one common question. So it's a little bit different scope. You, Professor Noble, talked about more like a water-based, more futuristic. It's not coming now, but maybe as an engineer, we can think about how to develop in real material, in water and something. That's just my impression. And then Professor Kunwoo Lee talked about more tangible. So we can do, and then we are doing it now, and then what will be in the future in the intelligence. But then my question is, I think this human consists of body and mind and spirit, but we now are talking about mind realm, right? So mind also consists of knowledge and emotion and will, right? Then what's your opinion? What level the intelligence made by artificial way? It can be either water molecule or it can be silicon material. You can envision what can be the maximum we can push in the future. So intelligence we made by human can mimic the nature-based mind. How far? That's my question.
Well, okay, yes, I'll use the microphone. Well, first of all, that is precisely why my brother Raymond and I invented this character Julie in the story between her as an AI-driven robot. She's got a silicon brain meshing with the rest of her body, while her boyfriend is an ordinary human. And of course, what he's detected is precisely that problem. Where is her emotion? Where is her spirituality? Where is the mind? Now, I think that poses a very deep question indeed, because I think that organisms have a very particular kind of organization that evolved over, well, we think about 3 billion years. And it is that there is meshing between every level of organization and the level below it and above it. So to take the whole organism, above it is the social level, the social interactions. Below it is the rest of the body. And similarly with the level of living cells, below it there is the molecular level, which it organizes in structures. That's what the immune system was doing when it created our immunity to coronavirus. And then above it, of course, are all the systems of the body that constrain what it can do. I don't see yet anybody making robots that have that kind of structure. And I think it's essential, because I believe that the flexibility, the ability to show emotion, and the ability to have interaction socially that we call part of our spiritual being, I think it may depend on that. I can't prove that. I don't know anybody who can do that yet, but I suspect that's the big difference. And that's why I've emphasized the challenge to AI people. And it's not a simple throwing it out to the rest of the world. I actually supervise a graduate student doing exactly this at the moment, together with people who are familiar with quantum computers and related issues to do with the nervous system. It's going to require, and we come back to your point about the need for interdisciplinarity, this is going to require interdisciplinary research between people concerned with systems like the immune system and the nervous system in biology, with philosophers concerned with the ethical and deep philosophical mysteries in relation to what is it to talk about emotion, what is it to talk about spirituality and the mind, as well as engineers and computer scientist trying to reproduce all of this. And what I'm hoping to do in the interactions with you people here at SNU, at DGIST and elsewhere where I'll be lecturing is to try to encourage that kind of interdisciplinarity. Because I think we've reached a point where no one discipline can solve the problem. I can't see that happening. But I think you're putting your finger on an absolutely important issue. And it's important to our sense of humanity, isn't it? If we really are just machines, where on earth is our emotion and our purpose? That's the point of the story, of course.
Okay, Professor Kunwoo Lee, any comment?
Sure.
Right.
What is the difference between the biological intelligence and semiconductor-based intelligence? That was your question.
My question is, in the point of system biology, as Professor Noble said, the system means gene is there, and cell, and organ, and system, our body, and going up, there is mind, there is spirit, right? In the system point of view, and which level we can achieve using our technology, and maybe I can ask Professor Noble, if you have a spirit and mind, and then control, whether it can control gene level, let's say going up and down, right? So,
Well, it mustn't it?
yeah, and the question to Professor Kunwoo Lee, maybe it's new question. Yes, yeah, I mean, from your engineering point of view, how far we can reach, whether mind level we can control, maybe knowledge we already attacked, right? Knowledge can be, superb to human now by AI, but mind is consists of knowledge and emotion and will, right? So that maybe it's not possible. So that's a personal opinion, you can say freely.
Our answer in Korean, because for all of you, it's easier to understand. Yeah. 그러니까 우리가 일반적으로 우리가 만든 AI가 사람과 진짜 똑같아지려면 아까 얘기한 스피릿한 거라든가 또는 이모션 이런 것도 다룰 수가 있어야 되겠는데 이모션을 다루려면 이모션을 센싱을 할 수 있어야 될 것 같아요. 그래야 그 다음에 그거를 뭐 뉴럴 네트에 넣든 어디에 넣든 해갖고 그걸 만들어낼 테니까. 그런데 우리가 이모션을 직접 센스는 못하지만 뭔가 그거와 관련된 다른 어떤 바이올로지컬한 어떤 퀀티티를 잴 수 있다면 가능해질 수는 있겠죠. 근데 문제는 우리가 꼭 그래야만 되느냐의 문제가 있습니다. 우리가 AI가 인간을 대체할 필요가 있는 거냐. 그러니까 오히려 아까 제가 발표에서 얘기했지만 인간의 기능을 확장하는 데 도움이 되는 게 더 바람직하지 인간의 모든 걸 다 대체하려고 하는 건 바람직한 방향은 아니라고 생각합니다. 그래서 윤리적인 문제도 있고 어디까지 갈 거냐 우리가 어디까지 갈 거냐 우리가 정하게 나누는 것 같아요. 저는 테크놀로지는 우리가 타겟을 정하면 결국은 풀 수 있다. 근데 우리가 어디까지 갈 거냐 우리가 먼저 정해야 될 것 같다. 그런 생각이 듭니다.
Okay. Any comment, Professor Noble? No?
Could I add one or two things?
Oh, yeah.
Or you can there's another aspect. There's another aspect to all of this that I think we should remember. In the 19th century, Charles Darwin, famous for having introduced natural selection, the passive, no purpose filter of humanity and other animals, which survive, which don't, purely chance. He also introduced the idea of attributing will and emotional choice to other organisms than humans. He did it for birds, like the peacock. He called it sexual selection. I call it social selection. I think, therefore, we're going to have, as scientists, to listen carefully to some of the deep philosophers. And I want to illustrate that very briefly with the following example. This is from the present Professor of Jurisprudence, that is, the philosophy of law, in Oxford, Ruth Chang. She characterizes what it is that is human in us as not so much the ability to make a choice. An AI system clearly can do that and do it vastly quicker than we could do, where it's possible to do a calculation of all the advantages of going this way compared to going that way or any other way. But she says what's characteristic of humans is commitment. Well, that's an emotional thing. We don't wait to decide who we're going, for example, to marry. We make a decision, and it's a commitment as a decision. It's not just sort of, well, I think of all the people, well, we might say this, of all the people I would like to spend my life with, you are the person. Sure, we do that, but that's after we've made the choice. That's the praise afterwards to encourage precisely that emotion to come through. But I think we have to listen carefully to philosophers thinking deeply about these questions with us.
Thank you for your insight. Okay, any question from floor? Yeah, Professor Park. Park? No.
Thank you very much, Professor Noble. Actually, I'm Professor of Mechanical Engineering at SNU, and then actually I learned precision engineering and all their system part and random part are there. Actually, I learned from England, right? And I learned today you talking about the systematic part and random part and all the stochastic processes in the living things. It's very, very inspiring, right? My question is actually, okay. When you talk about, living organizations or living cells, actually, they have very strong wishes and willingness to survive, to live. And actually, it's not just the set of molecules. Actually, very strong willing. Okay, I have to survive. Like you mentioned, Darwin's natural selections, right? So very strong willingness in biology, in biological cells. How do we mimic? How do you? Well, my question is, how can you coding or how can encoding that kind of things in the living cells? When you're talking about mathematical expressions or any kind of things, how do we do that kind of things? Can you explain more for that? Right.
I come actually to an attempt to answer that very difficult question to another great 19th century scientist, also 18th century because he spanned, Jean-Baptiste Lamarck, the French evolutionary biologist, long before Darwin, about 50 years ahead. He had an expression for it, le pouvoir de la vie, the power of life. And I think it's what Raymond and I say in our book, Understanding Living Systems. You've got to give that power characteristically, even to that single bacterium searching for its food, waving its flagellae this way and that way. It's making decisions all the time, but it's having to do it with a process, which is a water-based process, that is vastly slower than silicon chips. That's another big problem. And I think that what evolution has done in evolving organisms like us and other, what we sometimes call higher organisms with these abilities to make very complex choices in life, is that it has encouraged precisely that process, which I think is definitive of what a living system is. I think to ask the question, where does it come from? It comes from the living system itself. I think that's what we have to say.
Okay, along the same way, I have a question from floor. Actually, this is sent by text. I can just read. Professor Noble, it's an honor to meet you. My question for you concerns your critique of Richard Dawkins, the selfish gene. I'd like to ask if that critique is still valid today, and if so, to please explain the reasons why. Furthermore, if you discover new evidence concerning the errors in the selfish gene, I would appreciate it if you could share that as well. So
Well, let
talking
me
about
answer
Richard
that
Dawkins.
first immediately by saying Richard Dawkins is a brilliant writer. He is a brilliant storyteller. He's completely wrong. Let me go through it. First of all, DNA does not replicate like a crystal. Schrödinger made that mistake first. Crick and Watson compounded it with the central dogma. There are no dogmas in science. Oh dear, can we please? Well, I don't know what to say about that. That also is incorrect. It was used to claim, as Richard Dawkins does, and as standard evolutionary biologists do, that organisms cannot change their genes. Whatever else they can do, they can't do that. But what on earth was happening during the pandemic? Our immune systems detected that they hadn't got the immunoglobulin to capture that virus. Within 5 days, they found it. How did they do it? The system ordered the cells to mutate, to change the genome. You can change genomes. I'll tell you another way you can do it too. Nutrition, exercise, lifestyle also leads in the end to the epigenetic changes, which are just as much inherited as the genetic DNA ones. I could go on. I've got a whole list now of what is wrong with standard evolutionary biology. But those two are already sufficient. DNA cannot self-replicate. It cannot therefore be independent of its vehicle, which is the living cell. Point one. And point two, organisms do and demonstrably do change their genes when they need to do so. And on both of those, he's completely wrong.
Okay, thank you. If you ask him as a reference, he has a lot of references. Okay, Stefan.
Yes, thanks for the great talk, Professor. My question is also directed to Professor Noble. I was wondering, with the current developments in AI that we have, one of the biggest problems we can see in the research is that in many cases, we are not really sure why AI outputs are like they are, for example, in language models. We already, with the current state of silicon technology, have problems to understand these so-called black boxes. When you introduce the complexity of water operations with these incredible, highly statistical variants, can we imagine improving systems like this when we will have, probably with no technology that can be created, can we track how decisions are made and can we improve the systems by it if we cannot really measure the error since we cannot understand the statistics itself?
Well, I don't think we have the technology at the moment to be able to produce this fine meshing, I call it, between each level of organization in an organism and the levels it's interacting with, both above it and below it. And without that, it's a meshing in which, in effect, a social change producing, in effect, an epigenetic change within the organism, or a climate change that does that, whatever it might be, it doesn't think it trickles all the way down the system. And I know we can see rough parallels of that in the way in which processing languages in computing are arranged. The stack is, after all, called a stack, partly for that reason. But I think it's far from the use of stochasticity by each level of organization to locate through chance and find solutions to particular problems in a distributed network, because all our cells are doing that with trillions of cells in just one body. So it's a very good question, but I don't think we have the technology at the moment to mimic what a living organism is doing. One of the people who, it was actually at the present conference in Chiang Mai, came up to me and said, Denis, you've asked us to, can we make our AI systems out of water? Are you asking us to recreate life? I said, yes, precisely that.
Okay, any question to Professor Kunwoo Lee? Any question? No? Why you? No? Okay. Yeah.
반갑습니다. 아주 귀한 오늘 얘기해 주셔서 감사합니다. 아까 우리 노블 교수하고 얘기했던 거하고 좀 연관해서 좀 질문을 드리면은 아까 조그만 1마이크로 4마이크로 박테리아에 대해서도 뭐 수빌리언 셀이 좀 있는 파티클이 있는데 실질적으로 그것들이 스토캐스틱 프로세스에 의해서 막 진행이 된다고 이제 그렇게 얘기를 했단 말이죠. 그러면 우리가 진짜 바이오를 이제 뭐 융합을 하고 미믹을 하려고 그럴 때 결국은 지금 당장 걸리는 게 우린 끼키야 밀리언 처리하기도 어렵고 뭐 GPU가 아니라 GPU 할아버지 갖고 있어도 어려운 이거 굉장히 이거 뭐 머나먼 당신 아닌가? 굉장히 뭐 머나먼 얘기를 하는 거 아닌가? 그리고 아직도 가입할 때가 그러니까 간 거보다 뭐 갈 게 훨씬 더 많은 거 아닌가? 뭐 이런 생각을 들면서 조금 그런 생각이 드는데 혹시 뭐 숏컷이라든지 뭐 그럼에도 불구하고 이 어떤 그 가능성이 좀 더 있다든지 뭐 이런 것들을 한번 좀 이렇게 우리 디치 하시는 일 관련해 가지고 또 이렇게 얘기 좀 해주시면 우리도 인사이트가 좀 될 것 같습니다. 예.
저는 이 기술의 변화라는 게 뭐 다 스피드가 있는 건데 유독 AI에서만 기대치가 너무 높은 것 같은 느낌이 너무 그런 느낌이 들어요. 뭐 우리가 당장 모든 걸 사람하고 똑같게 하려고 한다는 거 그런 게 어떤 생명체랑 똑같이 하려고 한다는 게 지금 당장 암만 우리가 기술이 발달해도 금세 되지는 않을 것이고 차근차근 결국 조금씩 생명체가 진화했듯이 우리 기술도 그렇게 될 게 아닌가 그렇게 생각을 합니다. 저도 당장 무슨 아이디어가 저도 없고요. 어떻게 해야 좋겠는지. 단지 뭐 요새 아까 뭐 뉴로모픽 컴퓨팅 같은 게 좀 그래도 좀 효율적이지 않을까. 그 정도 얘기밖에 답을 드릴 수가 없을 것 같습니다.
네, 감사합니다. 또 다른 질문 있으면 네, 주시죠 저기.
Yes, I have a question for Professor Noble. That one thing I reminded when I attend your lecture that what very similar to the Douglas Hofstadter's the assertion in Gödel Bach book that when we consider the human intelligence, that we human time to time just skip the level of the chain of the thoughts. But I think it can be called and referred as a level crossing feedback of the chain of the thoughts. And since you mentioned the comparison between the human the biosystem and in silico, then what about the artificial intelligence and human intelligence? The significant difference is, I think, is the human can do such the level crossing feedback, but AI cannot do. And de facto, AI misleading to the hallucination due to they only rely on the probability, and then they strictly adhere to the step-by-step thinking. And how is the similar? Do you agree that this kind of level crossing feedback kind of thinking leads to the machines?
Well, it certainly if I've understood the question, and my hearing is not very good, so correct me if I've misunderstood. But you certainly need the feedback loops between all the levels, including across levels, because how on earth does the immune system communicate to the cells it's telling to reproduce because they found the right immunoglobulin? Well, we know to some degree how that happens because we know that signals at the very surface of a cell at a molecular level, a long distance away, can travel down the tubulins to precisely the right part of the nucleus and the right part of the genome. That's how the immune system targets the change in DNA to only the variable part of the coding for the immunoglobulin. So we know all of that happens. And it comes from the system as a whole, which is up there, near, as it were, to the whole organism as a whole, all the way down to individual cells that have got the right answer. I don't know how that happens. I can point to pathways within the cells for how the surface communicates down to the nucleus, but how on earth the rest of it is put together, we don't know. And that takes me to another point. This encapsulates the wisdom, if I can call it that, of 3 billion years of evolution. You see, you have to train AI to learn, don't you? It's got to be a learning process. Well, organisms have actually encapsulated within their systems, right from birth onwards, have encapsulated some of that knowledge that's been acquired over those 3 billion years of evolution. How on earth we could reproduce that as an AI system, I really don't know. But I may have misunderstood your question.
No, you answer quite accurately. But in that case, then how about building liquid machine is quite hard, but how about using as a cell or organism as a computer itself?
I'm going to have to come close to get this absolutely clear.
Okay. How about applying liquid as a computer is very technical demand, but how about using a cell organism as a computer itself?
Oh, combine,
Yeah.
you mean? Well, I might say that's cheating. Look, seriously. In other words, you would let the AI system learn from what the organism knows. Lovely idea. 축하합니다.
You mentioned in Music Over Life book that evolution is like a composer. A composer plans and designs in order to create a harmonious symphony. How can a gene and evolution which does not plan and design achieve such a complex system like human? It seems to require intelligence to be involved in the evolution process. Do you agree? That's the question.
Can you just repeat the last part of that?
Okay, how can gene and evolution, which does not plan and design, like human, achieve such a complex system? Yeah, it seems to require intelligence to be involved in the evolution process.
Yes. This is getting very close to where we need to bring in, it seems to me, the philosophers and well, including philosophers of religion too, because the great religions of the world have ideas about all of that. And I think we have to be open to the fact that this needs careful thinking philosophically. That's about all I can say that is positive, because I don't have an answer.
Difficult question. Okay, Yeah, the one over there.
Thank you for interesting and inspiring talk. My name is Kim Young-gon. I'm from Professor Yang Jin-gyu's lab in mechanical department, and I have 3 questions to Professor. just one? Okay, Denis. Okay. Then about the philosophical question. So I think that the speed of running of AI is quite faster than humans. So if AI can mimic the human mind perfectly, then after few years or 10 or 100 years, then AI can reach the state of future of the human. So in that situation, AI might be superior being than human. So how do you think this phenomenon or happening?
Yes, I think the best answer I can give you is that I doubt it. I think we're touching on some exceedingly important questions about what it actually is to be humanity, or indeed the characteristics of other organisms in their social lives. And science has by and large ignored all of that. If you look at the biggest textbook of evolutionary biology, Futuyma and Kirkpatrick, just simply called Evolution, published by none other than Oxford University Press. There's 600 pages. It's a brilliant textbook where it's correct. But there's only one page, and only about half of that page 20, I think it is, in the 2018 edition, devoted to philosophy. And it concludes with a very simple statement. There is no room for purpose in science. Well, blow me! What are we now attributing to artificial intelligence? And we would say there is no role of purpose is the ability of you and me and other organisms to anticipate what other organisms are doing. Otherwise you get eaten. Or you fail to get your lunch. As simple as that. It's life and death. And that means the nervous system has to anticipate. That's what purpose is. And a great textbook says it's not relevant to science. I utterly and totally disagree. But I think that's a good illustration of why we need good philosophers to come into this argument too. Because the philosophical mistakes of neo-Darwinist and modern synthesis thinking in evolution are simply incorrect. It's schoolboy errors.
Okay, I think this time's up and we need to go for lunch, right? We need to eat lunch. Oh. Yeah, we have thank you very much. Why don't you give big applause to the professor for the presentation?